Scouts Victoria respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Victoria where our activities take place today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and continue to recognise and embrace the important continuous history and connection to land and community of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people.
Hello everyone! Welcome to ScoutQuest. I'm Lawrence from Carlton Rover Unit. I'm a rover, but I'm also the State Commissioner for Environment. And I have with me today Alex, who's a Joey Scout from 1st Eaglemont, joining me. Hey Alex, have you got some weird questions ready for Dr. Karl today?
Hi Lawrence. I hope Dr. Karl tells us why wombats have square poo. My mom loves talking about poo.
Square poo is definitely weird. I'm so thrilled to introduce our special guest, Dr. Karl Krushelnitsky. He's the man with answers when it comes to science and technology. Karl has degrees in physics and maths, biomedical engineering, medicine and surgery, and has worked as a physicist, tutor, filmmaker, car mechanic, labourer, and as a medical doctor at the Kids Hospital in Sydney. His enthusiasm for science is totally infectious, and no one is better able to convey the excitement and wonder of it all than Dr. Karl. And Dr. Karl was a scout. So let's get started and welcome Dr. Karl.
Ahoy, Lawrence. I'm really excited to re-enter the world of scouts. I'm guessing that it's hard to get badges than simply making a phone call like it was in the old days.
Yes, we love working on all sorts of stuff for our badge work.
Yeah. So look, I'll find out more about that from you. So let's just start, and I'll press the magic button. And this is some footage from Christmas Island when I was up there a little while ago. But I'm no longer up there. I'm here with you guys. It's Scouts Victoria. And so now I'm going to switch the sound across to the presentation. And this is related to what you're asking with regard to wombats and wombat poo being square.
Do you have tiny cubical poos? In that case, you could be a wombat. This is the famous Bristol stool chart for human poos. You can see that it ranges from little lumps where you're constipated to liquid mush where you really got the squirts at the bottom. And humans should kind of be in the middle. But notice, there's not a single cubical poo in there. Cubical poos come only from wombats, which are Australian marsupials, about 1 metre long, and they weigh about 25 to 30 kilograms. So here's the big mystery. We don't know how the wombats make their cubic poos, and we don't know why. Now, some people say, oh, well, they're territorial animals and they're marking their territory. But there are lots of territorial animals, and none of them make cubical poos. Maybe they have cubic poos because they have a square meal every day. Look, if you've got a better idea, put it in the comments.
Okay. So that's cubic poos. Actually, maybe what's going on is that the pyramids in Egypt, maybe the pyramids are actually square poos or cubic poos left over by the giant aliens. I don't know, things flying from space is a bit hard. So let's go and work with something a little bit closer to home. Let's work with the Bermuda Triangle. Now, you've probably all heard about the Bermuda Triangle, and yes, it's in the shape there. You see it at Bermuda and Miami and Puerto Rico. And this is the famous plane that was involved with getting lost there. And here you can see it flying at the end of the Second World War over an aircraft carrier and then over Mount Fuji. So what's happening with the Bermuda Triangle and these people in the aeroplane? These people, the crew of 5 of these Avenger torpedo bombers. This is the last photograph ever taken of these people. This is the legendary Lost Squadron, the people who vanished on December 5, 1945. Then they lost radio contact, and then things got messy, and then a Martin Mariner rescue plane. Now, that could fly in the air for 24 hours because it was basically just a petrol tank with wings. And that also disappeared. And then the official Navy record says the causes are still unknown. So look at the time when it all happened. Now notice there that it's the 5th of December 1945. Think about that date. So here we have 5 Avenger torpedo bombers, and they're all experienced aviators. Let me emphasize the word experienced. And in fine weather, let me emphasize fine. And then put out a series of increasingly incoherent radio messages as they became more disoriented and panicked. And their very last radio transmission on the 5th of December 1945 was at 7:04 p.m. Then at 7:40 p.m., a Martin Mariner rescue plane, the one, the flying petrol tank with wings, it went out to look for them, and it also vanished without a trace. They all vanished, totally without a trace, apart, of course, from a cameo appearance in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But apart from that, they all totally vanished without any trace whatsoever. Until in 1964, Vincent Gaddis wrote a story about it in a science fiction magazine. Who reads science fiction? Okay, I do, but nobody else. And so nobody ever heard about it. It only hit the public consciousness around 1974 when Charles Berlitz wrote his book, The Bermuda Triangle. Now, let me tell you something. If he says that it was green, it was blue, he says it was day, it was night, this guy, he could not lie straight in a bed. He'd get twisted up in a corkscrew. Everything he says is lies, and let's just dive into his book. So here's the book cover, and oh my God, look at that. There's a skull and crossbones in the title, and look at the aeroplane. The aeroplane is half white, and then half, whoa, look at that. It's half coloured. And then the ship, it changes from white and coloured. Oh, my God. And then down on the ocean floor, what do we got down there? Oh, my God. You've got some sort of weird device on the ocean floor. And look, here's a ship and a plane. Oh, my gosh. So there's the book. So let's go back to this area, the Bermuda Triangle, which is, well-known area. And you get a lot of hurricanes going through there, big, fat hurricanes, because it's close to the equator. And the ships sink and the planes sink. But because it's 9 kilometres deep, when they vanish, they stay vanished. 9 kilometres down, we don't have the technology to do that. Amazing. Now, that area is, in fact, really heavily trafficked by ships and planes. There's a huge amount of traffic. It's near the equator, near Puerto Rico, near America. And according to Lloyd's of London, while you do get quite a few losses of ships and planes there, when you average it out, it's pretty well the same as the rest of the world on a percentage basis. Some years more, some years less, but it averages out to be pretty well the same. Now, what about those aviators? Well, here's the weird thing. These people were not experienced aviators. Think about that date. That day was just immediately after the Second World War. The war was over. And all of the armies, navies and air forces of the world were standing down their armies and shoving all the people they had in the Army, Navy, Air Force into civilian life. And the Navy was doing these people a favour. They were training them how to be pilots. By the way, if you fly for the Air Force as a pilot, if you fly for the Navy, it's called an aviator. So none of them were trained except for one person. And that one single person was Lieutenant Charles Taylor. And he was the group leader. Now, there's something amazing about Lieutenant Charles Taylor. Firstly, he was a pretty angry sort of guy who drank a lot of alcohol. And they do have a motto in the Navy and in the Air Force, which is 24 hours between throttle and bottle, right? And he turned up drunk, still reeking of alcohol from the night before. The other thing about him was that he was a pretty unpleasant sort of guy. And when he tried to give his shift away to some of the other group leaders, they said, nah, no way. And the third thing about him was, and remember, he's a person in charge of 5 aeroplanes with 15 humans on them, he was a really bad navigator. He was such a bad navigator that he had already ditched 3 times before in wartime conditions, managed to land in the ocean without dying, and managed to get rescued in a war, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So the aviators were not experienced, their leader was incompetent and drunk, and the fine weather was perfectly fine, apart from a hurricane with 5-metre waves. But apart from that, it was perfectly fine. And then the Martin Mariner rescue plane, the flying petrol tank, well, this was the Second World War, and they were made not perfect, just good enough. And some of them leaked petrol fumes. You just get a big tank, fill it full of petrol, wrap an aeroplane around it, add wings, some engines, off you go. And if some of them leak fuel, well, it's wartime conditions, they'll get shot down anyway. Just keep going, make them as good as you can. And the captain and the crew of this plane had previously been reprimanded for smoking in the aeroplane while there was a senior officer. And so what you have is a situation that this plane was seen to take off by the crew of 2 ships in the harbour, about 200 people altogether. And they saw the plane go put, 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 take off, get to about 200 feet above. By the way, you measure height of aeroplanes in feet. Get to 200 feet up, and then in front of 200 witnesses, it exploded in a ball of fire. It did not just vanish without trace. It exploded in a ball of fire. But there is one thing about this Bermuda Triangle story that all of the scientists with their fancy PhDs and their lab coats have never been able to disprove. When Charles Berlitz says that this shape over here with 3 straight sides is called a triangle, nobody has ever been able to disprove him. Everything else, total pack of lies. So the aeroplanes falling out of the sky is a bad thing. Animals, you and me, falling out of the sky, a bad thing. But cats seem to have an extra trick. And it turns out that cats can survive a fall from 32 stories better than a fall from 7 stories. I came across this way back in a paper called the Highrise Syndrome in Cats. High-rise means skyscrapers in New York. Syndrome is a bunch of common characteristics. Cats, meow, they're those little animals. And this article appeared in 1988 and it came with a very interesting graph. Now, look at the graph. So over here, on one side, what you've got is the death rate, the mortality rate. And over here, you've got the number of stories fallen. Now, this is weird. Now, look at the cats. The death rate goes up, and then it goes down again. Oh, my God, what's happening? But then look at the death rate for the humans. It goes up and climbs and climbs and climbs and goes almost, but not quite, to 100%. And the reason it doesn't go exactly to 100% is that some people do survive a fall from a great height. There was one just a few weeks ago. And there's a case of a parachutist who survived the fall from 2.8 kilometres. But according to the fireman, it was a wet ground. And as a result, she put a good 12-inch hole into the ground. Now, I don't know about you, but I found this immensely confusing because a hole into the ground I can understand. But good? I had no idea that holes in the ground could have moral values and that some of them could be good and that some of them could be bad. So instead, I've got a video for you, which I'll roll for you right now.
Science has proven that cats do have 9 lives. It's safer for a cat to fall from a 32-storey building than from a 7-storey building. Now, in New York, most of the people live in high-rise buildings. This combination of humans, high-rise buildings, birds flying past open windows, cats and concrete pavements gives a ready-made environment to test the aerodynamics and impact resistance of falling cats. The cats were not deliberately thrown out of high-rise buildings, they jumped out by themselves. At least, that's what the owners of the cats said when they took the cats to the local animal hospital. Over a 5-month period, 132 cats fell from buildings and ended up in hospital. It was raining cats at about 1 cat per day. No dogs were included in this experiment. 2 vets at the hospital examined and repaired the fallen felines and then looked back and analysed their figures. They found that the average fall was 5.5 stories and that 90% of the cats survived. They also noticed that at low altitudes, the number of injuries depended on the height of the fall. If a cat fell from 2 stories, it had a 25% chance of getting 1 broken bone. But as the height increased, the energy that the cat had to dissipate increased, and of course there were more broken bones. All very reasonable. then the statistics showed something very funny. As the cats fell from even greater heights, they broke fewer bones. A cat falling from 32 stories had only a 10% chance of breaking a bone. So it was safer for a cat to fall from 32 stories than it was from 7 stories. And in fact, 7 stories was the most dangerous height to fall from. Now, the reason that you fall when you jump out of a window is because gravity sucks. If there was no atmosphere, you just keep on falling faster and faster. But we do have an atmosphere, and wind resistance does slow you down. When the suck of gravity is balanced by the resistance of the wind, you're now travelling at what is chillingly called the terminal velocity, your top speed. This speed depends on the size and weight of the falling object. For a human being, the terminal velocity is about 200 kilometres per hour. But a cat is lighter and fluffier, and it has a terminal velocity of roughly 100 kilometres per hour. Now, we do know that cats are magnificent athletes, and within the first metre of a fall, they twist and turn in space so that all 4 feet are pointing downwards, and then they begin to accelerate. The common house cat reaches its terminal velocity or top speed after about 5 stories. Now, so far, everything we've talked about is fact. But if we want to answer the eternal question of why it's safer for a cat to fall from a very tall building, we have to enter the land of theory. For the first 5 stories, the cat is still accelerating, and it knows it, and it's worried. By the 5th story, it's reached 100 kilometres per hour, its top speed, and once our plunging pussy realises that it's not going to fall any faster, it relaxes. But it takes at least a third of a second to realise this, and by that time, it's fallen past the 7th floor, and that's why 7 stories is the most hazardous height to fall from, because our falling cat is really, really tense. But the longer it falls, the more it can chill out. If the cat is relaxed, it'll be in a state of dynamic tension. And if it's had time to get perfectly lined up, all 4 paws will hit the ground at the same instant, spreading the impact. They'll pass the shock up through the 4 legs. The bones will absorb some of the energy of the impact by bending, but they won't break. Tendons, ligaments and muscles will all absorb more energy by stretching, but not tearing in our relaxed cat. A squillionth of a second later, the rib cage hits, and so the rest of the energy is spent bending, but not breaking, the ribs. But this raises 3 issues. First, be careful when you next visit New York. It's raining cats at 1 a day. Second, it's not fun to fall from a tall building. So, make sure your cat keeps its feet on the ground, and make sure you do too. And third, maybe the cats didn't jump after all. Maybe they were pussed.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. That's such a terrible, terrible pun. Oh, dear. Okay. So, yes, they do survive better from a great height. And you can see this happening over here in this graph. So here you can see the number of stories fallen down here at the bottom. And over here you can see the number of injuries per cat. Now, if the cat falls 1 story, well, there's a certain amount of energy to get rid of, gets a certain number of injuries. Double the height of the fall, double the energy, roughly double the injuries. Same when you get to doubling it again up to 4. But when you get up to about 5 or 6, it's beginning to tail off. And by the time you get to the 6th or 7th floor, the cat has reached its top speed. And no matter how far it falls, it's not going to go any faster. That's its top speed. You've got 2 forces acting against each other, gravity sucking and wind resisting. And then the longer it falls, the more time it has to relax. And it turns out the cats are just at the limit of an animal which can fall an infinite height and not break. So if you've got a very fat, hairless cat, or that won't do well. But if you've got a very small, very fluffy dog, it'll do okay. Dogs, unfortunately, it turns out that cats, but not dogs, do this thing called secondary bouncing. So cats will go boing, boing, but dogs will just sort of go splat. Flying's so dangerous. I actually flew down to Antarctica recently and did a few nice things there. So let me tell you the difference between the Arctic and the Antarctic. So literally, ant means opposite, and Arctic can mean north or bear. So Antarctic is the opposite of the place which is north and opposite of the place where you have the bear. In the Arctic, you have a small amount of ice floating on a small amount of water. The Antarctic is the exact opposite, with a huge amount of ice sitting, not floating, but sitting on a lot of land. Not a little bit of land, but a lot of land. The Arctic is surrounded by not much water and then a lot of land. And the Antarctic is the opposite, surrounded by a huge amount of water and then a little bit of land. And so in the Arctic, you've got polar bears, but down in the Antarctic, you've got tardigrades. And I really love tardigrades. They're these weird little things, you call water bears. They've got 8 legs. They're about 1 millimetre long, half a millimetre long, 1/10 of a millimetre long. You can see them just under a microscope. They're all over the place. And they are seeming to be the toughest creatures we know of. They will survive in space for weeks at a time. And when I say in space, I don't mean inside the International Space Station. I mean on the outside. On the outside, travelling at 27,000 kilometres an hour or 7 kilometres a second, on the outside with no air, the harsh radiation from the sun, harsh radiation from space, and exposed to a temperature change of plus 200 and minus 200, and you bring them inside after a couple of months and then they just wake up again. So down in the Antarctic, what you've got is, over here on the left, huge amount of ice on land with all this water around it. Here's a bit of Africa and a little bit of South America and a little bit of Australia and New Zealand, but basically it's water. Whereas the Antarctic is much smaller, the Arctic is much smaller, and look at all this land around it, and then water around that. So to get there, we flew from Hobart over here, and then down to Casey Base Station. And it wasn't very pretty. It's sort of like a military industrial site. You can see these big red buildings. Now, just keep an eye on things, because in different parts of the screen, you can see things like down here, you can see the temperature and the time and all sorts of things. So just keep an eye on those. And if you look at this building, you'll notice that there's one thing wrong with this building, which is that over here, it does not have a Triple J flag. Well, we went ahead and defaced official government property with a Triple J flag. Whoop, there it is. Oh, that was quick. Now see how the temperature down the bottom left is -2, -3. See the wind is 20, 30 kilometres an hour, and up at the top you got the sun. 10 o'clock at night, bang, it goes down, and then it wakes up again, and the sun rises again at about 5, and so the day goes on. This is the first iceberg I saw down there, which was just lovely. We were going across to an island, and on this island there's all these birds, and floating in the air is this guy here, a skua. Now, some of these are adult penguins, and some of them are baby penguins. Feathers, sort of fluffy stuff. And the skua is just hanging around for free food. Me, I'm trying to make sure that I don't turn into food for anybody else. By when we went over on the boat, I wore this floating thing, complete floating, and it'd probably give me maybe 10, 20 minutes in the water before I died of hypothermia. So for me, one big amazing thing about the Antarctic was there's cyclones down there, and there's wind down there. When I say wind, firstly, there's this wind going around in a clockwise direction continuously around Antarctica. But then secondly, there's about half a dozen cyclones that are always going around in a clockwise direction while simultaneously rotating clockwise. There's another one and another one. And you're thinking, but aren't cyclones only near the equator? Well, that's what I thought. I was wrong. And so this circle of wind is called the Southern Annular Mode. Look it up on Wikipedia, SAM, the wind going around Antarctica. And when it expands outwards, we end up with blizzard conditions, cold conditions across Australia. And when it shrinks, you end up with blizzard conditions on the continent of Antarctica. And how do you deal with it? Well, everything's normal when the wind is under 74 kilometres an hour. You have to have a bit of caution when it gets up to 110 and a bit more when it gets up to 185, and you ain't going nowhere when it gets over 185. So on a day when the wind was then sort of gusting up to about 71 knots, I thought I'd go out. So there you can see 71 knots, and there's a general rule of thumb that you can survive a wind at the rate of 1 knot of wind per kilogram of body weight. I weigh about 82 kilograms. I can take 82 knots of wind without blowing over. And what is this 71 knots? It's about 130 kilometres an hour. So my first surprise was that there's cyclones down there. My second surprise was that you can get caught in a blizzard and you look across and there's this wind blowing at you with snow, and you look up and there's blue sky. Oh my gosh. And here's more blue sky. So they're the gas bottles for cooking. They're kept outside so that if they go bad, they don't destroy the building and then we die. And then as the wind blows up and the snow gets bigger, there still is a blue sky. So obviously the thing to do when it gets up to about 170 kilometres an hour is to go outside. And here we go. I'm going outside and it's very noisy out there. Oh my God, it's just terrible. Now, I had a label on me, so I was wearing all these thick Antarctic grade clothes. And the reason I had a label on me, so if I got blown away, they could identify the body in the snow. I don't know why. And then I was wearing all this full gear, but the tradies, oh my heavens, they're so tough. They're just out there without all the full safety gear. Me, I'm a wuss. I need gloves. I like gloves. I'm wearing gloves. But these people, forget it, man. They don't need gloves. They just go out there wearing hardly, no gloves, and just going out there wearing, wait for it, thongs. And over here's a nice bit of tradies cleavage. And on the corner of the building there, the wind is about 200 kilometres per hour. And it's quite hard now to survive that. By a few mornings later, the wind had died down to only about 50 kilometres per hour. And here I am going to work wearing my full Antarctic gear, -5, 50 kilometres an hour. Those boots I'm wearing are Australian government Antarctic boots. They're good for 60 degrees below zero. Here I am going to work. Hello, goodbye. There I go. And then I hold the record for doing the first ever talkback radio from Antarctica. And then I experienced something really weird. They said when we were flying out, hey, you want to check out the toilet? I said, what do you mean? They said, check out the toilet. I said, right, I'm in. And I thought, oh, yeah, it looks like a regular toilet to me, until I looked more closely. Incinolet, electric incinerating toilet. Oh, my God. So I opened up the lid, which you weren't supposed to do, and looked inside. And there, instead of a ceramic bowl, the bowl is stainless steel. And down there at the bottom, you can see a bit of poo burning away completely without odour. And then it says on the instructions on the lid, you do a wee over here, and then if you want to do a number 2, you get a little bit of thick cardboard bowl liner, and then you do your number 2 in that. And then when you finish, it says, and they're very insistent on this, they've got exclamation marks. It says, face toilet to flush. And I thought, why do I have to face the toilet to flush? Why can't I flush the toilet while I'm just sitting on it? I'll follow their instructions. So I lift up the lid and flush the toilet, and this is what I saw. Firstly, a bit of a spark, and then, oh my God, nuclear holocaust. That's why you got to get off the toilet before you flush it, because flushing's nothing to do with water. It's putting a burst of flames through it, and it'd be very embarrassing going to the doctor saying, I've got some burns on my buttocks. How'd they get there? Oh, I'd rather not tell you. So I talk about this in one of my books. I've got the first books in the world, this is one of them, Random Road Trip, with, wait for it, holograms. So I'll just demonstrate the hologram for you now, and here we go. Looking at the whole page.
Every day, wombats poo out about 90 little cubies. Yes, they're cube. And they seem to make these cubies by some sort of process we don't fully understand. And when we do, we might be able to use it in our manufacturing processes.
So to make this bit work, for the pop-up me, you've got to have the camera aimed at the page. But look, there's a few hot spots underneath, or in a technical term for this is floaty things. And so we hit one of these floaty things. Oh my gosh, what will happen? Gee, there's a home page downloading from the ABC, a story by me. And my other book also has it in there, holograms as well. So look, thank you very much for letting me talk to you. Scouts Victoria. And now we're ready to go with questions. So, Lawrence, I'll throw back to you and you tell me what we do next.
Hello, we're back.
Hurrah!
So yes, we've got a few questions in the chat, so don't forget to pop them in, comment, and let us know what you want to know from Dr. Karl.
Okay,
I think
back
Alex
to
is
me.
going to start off with some questions. Have you got some
Alex.
questions, Alex?
Yeah. So, how do you think coronavirus started?
We don't know. The most likely case is that we disturbed some natural vegetation and it came out. We know of about 1.6 million viruses. How many attack humans? 219. And we've had trouble in the past with smallpox from cattle and measles from horses and the AIDS virus from chimpanzees in the wild when we disturbed their territory. That's killed 30 million people already in this pandemic. And then SARS, MERS, and then now this latest one, Hydra virus in New Zealand, in Brisbane. They all came from animals in the wild. So we don't know for sure because we haven't got all the data, but the most likely cause is that it came from us interfering with animals in the wild, in some way bulldozing their forests, and then it jumped onto us. The second one, which is not as likely, is that they were exploring this virus in the laboratory and it accidentally jumped onto humans due to poor safety controls. And the third one, which is, again, at this stage, less likely again, is that it was a deliberately engineered, weaponized virus that once again jumped out of the laboratory because of improper safety controls. Let me talk about the safety controls. So out near Geelong, you've got one of the half dozen BSL-4, biohazard safety level 4 buildings in the whole world. There's only half a dozen. And so you've got an outer ring of concrete and then successive rings of concrete. And in each stage, the air pressure is less than one outside it. So if anything escapes from here, it goes inwards to the next level, and then inwards to the next level, and inwards to the next level, until finally it ends up at the centre. Then they catch it with HEPA, high efficiency particulate filters, catch the virus, and then incinerate it at high temperatures. Now, we have had a report from previous visitors to the Wuhan Biosafety Laboratory that the standards inside were kind of sloppy in some cases, and they were not biohazard BSL-4 or 3, just 2. What's 2? It's kind of like what your dentist uses. So at this stage, we don't know, but the most likely is that it came from some wild creature, jumped into another wild creature, onto humans in the Wuhan markets, but we won't know because the markets were just completely wiped out. They were sterilized, they were wiped clean, which is the exact opposite of what you're doing. What you want to do is if you're trying to track it down. So at this stage, the straight answer is we don't know. You got another question, Dr. Alex?
Got 2 more.
Sure.
What are hiccups and how to get rid of them?
I've written about how to get rid of them in one of my books, and basically just follow the old saying in surgery. If there's one cure for something, it nearly always works. And if there's a bunch of cures, no, they don't work. So with appendicitis, we've got a great cure for appendicitis. You got appendicitis, here's the cure. We take it out. Done. 100% success rate. But when it comes to hiccups, there's so many different treatments. Basically, you're trying to put pressure on the vagal nerves, like you press on your eyeball or you pull your tongue. You can't do that for long. What causes them? Well, it's a leftover reflex from the past, before you got born. You see, before you were born, you were floating around inside your mother's uterus, drinking your own wee. Yeah, I know, that's amniotic fluid. Ugh, yuck. And now the thing about liquid versus air, it's about nearly 1,000 times heavier, mass for volume. So a cubic meter of air is 1.25 kilograms. A cubic meter of liquid water, a ton, 1,000 kilograms. 1,000 kilograms versus 1.5, big difference. So when you're floating around in the uterus, your lung has to be ready, the muscles have to be ready immediately you get born for being able to breathe air. And how much of a practice go do you get? Not one single practice go, except for the hiccuping. So babies from about 12 weeks of age hiccup for about an hour each day. And it turns out that this hiccuping is training for the muscles of the lungs and the diaphragm, so that when you get born and you take your first breath, you don't give up after a few seconds because you're tired. You've been training your lungs. So hiccuping has an absolutely essential function before you get born. Once you're born, forget it. Has no other use except to be really, really annoying. I've written a few stories about this on the ABC homepage. Look up ABC, Dr Karl, and hiccups. And you got another question, Dr Alex?
Why do kids like sugar so much?
Why does anybody like sugar? It's energy. So for most of our evolutionary history, we haven't had a guaranteed high quality food supply. We just haven't. So we started off in the trees and then split off from the chimpanzees about 7 million years ago, and then stayed in the trees for about 5 million years. And then about 2 million years ago, we had two mutations. Firstly, our hip changed so that we could walk on the ground. And what this meant that our hands could become more skillful. And secondly, we lost our body hair. And hair's made of protein. So the protein then went into our brains, and our brains got bigger. And then suddenly with our thumbs, because we were walking on our back legs, we could do this. This is called the pincer grip. See how I'm rolling it backwards and forwards? A chimpanzee can't do that. How do you do it? With the hands, but also with the brain. So we needed our brain to evolve so that we could do that. I know it's a big, complicated answer. Sorry about that.
All right, I think we're going to field some questions from the comments now.
Hurrah!
Oh, Chris has asked, why do you grow white hair as you get older?
Well, the hair on your scalp is it has a situation where each shaft of hair is individually manufactured by a single hair follicle. One hair making factory. So the hair making factory is called a follicle, and it extrudes, it pushes out the hair at a few millimeters every week, and it also colors the hair. There's a little sub-factory that injects dye into the hair. And often what happens, and we don't know why, is that the hair starts to grow faster and thicker, and we don't know why. And you'll see it sort of growing, and then a sudden bend, it's got a few sudden jerks in it, just these big, fat, long hairs, and they're still coloured, and then suddenly they stop being coloured. And what we think happens is that because of the extra metabolic load, because they're working so hard, they make chemicals that we call ROS, reactive oxidative species, ROS. And these reactive oxidative species, these then poison the factory that gives the dye colour into the hair shaft. That's the latest theory. There's a few other theories.
Elaine asks, how would faster than light travel be achieved, and what would happen?
Amazingly, I answered both those in my latest book, ta-da, over there, Surfing Safari. Now, the first thing is you can't travel faster than the speed of light in space or in space-time. So what's space-time? 4 dimensions of space. Backwards, forwards, left, right, up, down, and they're the 3 dimensions. And notice in each of those dimensions you can go backwards and forwards. And the 4th dimension is time, which ticks away on your watch at usually 1 second per second. And we're not sure why, but it only goes forward. Together, these make up the 4 dimensions of space-time. When you're travelling on space-time, or in it, you can't go faster than the speed of light for various reasons. But you can make the fabric of space-time itself move faster than the speed of light. This actually happened way back in the early days of the Big Bang. So shortly after the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, about 1 trillionth of 1 trillionth of 1 trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, the whole universe went through a thing called inflation, which inflation sounds too wussy a word. It should be called super mega inflation, where the fabric of space-time of the universe expanded at thousands of times faster than the speed of light and then stopped. But if it hadn't gone through that acceleration, expanding faster than the speed of light, today's entire universe would be roughly the size of the dot on the letter I on a printed page.
Wow.
So how do you go faster than the speed of light? So it's called the Alcubierre effect. Look it up on Wikipedia or in my latest book, but you can get it for free on the ABC homepage. Look up ABC Dr Karl, Faster Than Light. And so Miguel Alcubierre came up with this idea of how to do it. What you do, imagine you want to travel from Sydney to Melbourne. Now, the trouble is that there's all this space in front of you. So what you do is you grab that space and you shrink it down to nothing. And the space behind you, you expand that until you end up in Melbourne. So you can travel at virtually infinite speed anywhere, much, 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 much faster than the speed of light. Now, a few problems. Firstly, to power it, it turns out you need negative energy, which might be what's powering dark energy. Secondly, what would be the result? As you're coming in to your destination, you start to slow down. And then one unfortunate side effect is you set off a shockwave that destroys everything for a couple of dozen light years in the direction you're heading. Minor problem.
Only a small problem. All right, Jamie's asking, how can a cockroach live without its head for such a long time?
Well, the head doesn't do a lot of important stuff. I mean, the head has got eyes and it's got sensors, so it knows where it's going. And it's got a mouth, but it doesn't run its legs. That's all run by little subbrains in the spine. It's got all sorts of good reflexes. So you had the case of where Mike, the headless chicken, lived for 18 months without a head. And so providing the brain isn't essential for running the body, what do you need it for? You want to discuss poetry? I don't know how much poetry cockroaches discuss.
All right. Deanna's asking, when is the Earth closest to the sun? Oh, actually, this question's from Emily.
Around January the 4th every year.
Okay.
So the Earth's orbit around the sun is not circular. There's not a single circular orbit anywhere in the universe. They're all slightly egg-shaped, like a Aussie rules football. Did you see the Aussie rules on the weekend? Carlton versus Sydney? Okay, I won't talk any more about that. Love you, buddy. And Heaney, he's so good. It was a close match. Both sides played well. And then the point of closest approach at the moment happens around the 4th of January. And the difference, the difference in the distance from the sun between the closest and furthest approach is about 5 million kilometres out of about 140 million kilometres. And then gradually that point of closest approach will move around the sun and so move around with the year until it comes back to where it started off in about 23,000 years.
Wow. All right. Question from Penny. Why do we burp, and is it dangerous to hold them in?
But I don't fully understand burping. I'm reading up on it. Somebody in my family has a condition called, wait for it, aburpia. Now, it's not that hard to speak medical. All you've got to do is know a few Latin and Greek roots. So burp obviously means burp. Ia means the condition of, and a means not. So this person can't burp.
Wow.
On the other hand, my producer used to be somebody who could actually burp the entire alphabet and did all of the burps for that terrible movie, Liz Patterson Saves the World. You should see it sometime. So if you hold in the burps, you just build up a little bit of pressure in your gut, and then the gases will be reabsorbed into your bloodstream, and it'll give you a bit of bad breath. And you're probably better off letting it out. Maybe go to the bathroom and sort of run the water really loud, or play some music like they do in Japan, and then burp away and generate all the gas you want.
And then don't follow them into the bathroom afterwards.
Well, hopefully there's a big fat. Well, then you can use the trick from the mafia of striking a match.
Oof.
And what the match does is, as it ignites, it throws out a shower of particles of activated carbon, which absorb the smells really well. So just simply blowing a match and then blow it out, strike another match, blow it out, do it 3 or 4 times, it'll significantly reduce the smells in the bathroom.
There you go. Easy air freshener. All right. Anthony's asking, is there proof that aliens exist? Oh, sorry. Again, this is from Will, actually, not Anthony.
I wish there was. I really, really wish there was. Mate, we've got super sharp photos of Moon and Mars and Jupiter and the Kardashians and every single sports. Why is it that the only people who cannot take photos that are sharp and in focus are the people who claim there are aliens out there? Show me some sharp, in focus photos and I'll start looking at it. Until then, we got nothing. And think about this. Suppose the aliens, if they exist, suppose the aliens want to make themselves hidden from us. Well, they're doing a really bad job because every person seems to be able to find them. But suppose they want to make themselves known to us. Once again, they're doing a really bad job. All they had to do was at quarter time or half time or 3/4 time, land their flying saucer in the Melbourne cricket ground, and then suddenly everybody would know they're there. So they're hopeless at remaining hidden and hopeless at being found. Wow. Give me a better story.
All right. Caden is asking, is it true that there is a black hole coming towards us very slowly?
Don't know. We don't know. In our galaxy, the Milky Way, which is a very old galaxy, we know how many black holes there should be. It's part of the natural evolution of a star. And basically, there'd be up to about 1 billion black holes. There should be 1 billion black holes in our galaxy. And so far, we've found 3 dozen. That's a lot we don't know. Do we have any proof that there's a black hole coming towards us? No. Does Caden want to talk more about that? Where did Caden find this? Or Jodez? I don't know.
I'm not sure. We might get it back up on the screen if there's any follow-up.
Sure.
Oh no, we've got another question. All right.
Yeah.
Lila from Second Newport. Why does some stuff smell different when it's burnt into fire?
Because it's a different bunch of chemicals. The way that smell works is a lock and key situation. This happens in our doors, in our cars and houses. You put the key in the lock and something happens. It happens all the way through your body with the various hormones like insulin and thyroid hormone and all the other couple of dozen hormones. They go everywhere in your body, but they only act where there's a lock, a receptor for them to get into the cell. So the insulin flows around your whole body, doesn't do much in your brain, but on your muscles, there are insulin receptors. And when the insulin sits into those insulin receptors, suddenly, if there's any glucose in the bloodstream, it gets sucked into the muscle and gets taken out of the blood and gets turned into a chemical called glycogen, a storage chemical. You normally carry a couple of kilograms of that and about 3 times as much water. So with smelling, similar situation. Lock and key. There's a key and there's a lock and the key fits exactly. And so when the smell goes up your nose and lands on the olfactory epithelium, it lands exactly somewhere. And suddenly you're smelling something. Roses, coffee, whatever. When you burn it, it's a different thing. It's not the same chemical anymore. You've added oxygen to it. You might have broken it apart. A whole bunch of different chemicals. Very few chemicals make it through a fire untouched. And so if they're a different chemical, if they're a different shape, they've got a different smell.
Guess that's just why it is. All right.
Yeah.
Jessica's asking, how do taste buds work and why don't we all like the same flavors?
There's at least 5 different types of taste buds for the different flavors of sweet, sour, acid, bitter, and umami. And there's probably another one for fat, and there might be a few more. And once again, they work on a lock and key basis. So when the glucose goes into any of the other receptors except the sweet receptor, nothing. But when it goes into a sweet receptor, it fits exactly. And it sends a signal to the brain saying, hey, that tastes sweet. I like it. Hang on, I've just lost my camera there for a second. So now I'm going to change. The battery's gone flat. Here we go. And we go to the backup camera of that one. How's that
You
looking?
can tell you're a scout because you're super prepared.
Yeah, so that one should work now. Hang on. Why isn't it working? Hang on. I'm just going to switch here and back again. The camera went off. Right. I do have plan B, which is, wait for it, a completely spare battery. In fact, wait for it, I've got 2 spare batteries. So I'm just going to take this battery out.
Able to change your camera in the cam mic settings down the
I
bottom.
tried that and it didn't like it, which is bothering me. I don't know why. Bummer, man. Okay, here we go. Yeah, the battery doesn't work. That's amazing. Okay, now I'm going to go back into camera, FaceTime camera. Okay, I'm going to try this other camera as well. Oh, there. Hello. There I am. Okay, so let me just try this camera again. Luckily, I had a backup to the backup. Why doesn't that camera work? And I don't even know. But I'm going to get this camera out of the way. And here it goes. And look, then this camera should be working again. Aha!
Yay!
Let's just get this right. And then just adjust that a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so my main camera didn't work and my backup camera didn't work, but the backup camera did. Sometimes you're lucky. Okay, where were we?
Sorry, yes, Jessica was talking about why don't we all like the same flavors?
Well, a mixture, once again, as many things are, of nature and nurture. What you're born with and what happens to you during life. So if you live in, say, India and your mother, who's carrying you in her tummy, eats lots and lots of curries, blow me down, you'll grow up loving curries. Right. Now, I'm just going to check that is my sound still sounding okay? It didn't run to the other camera, did it? Okay, so the audio is still on these external... Hang on, that's this one here?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Right, okay. Well, I can fix this later. Be prepared. Actually, I'm kind of a belt and braces kind of guy. I do like to be really prepared for practically everything.
Awesome. Jasmine's asked, how many animals have not been discovered?
Probably about 0.01% of the animals that have been discovered. It's not 1%, but maybe 0.01%. It all depends what you call an animal. Is it going to be a megalodon, or are you happy with an obscure species of turtle somewhere? Or do you count insects as animals? We really have not classified corals properly either, and they count as animals. And we're discovering more as we're going through classifying them. I've done a podcast on that. Go to my homepage, drkarl.com, and I've just done with she's a reef scientist, and she classifies corals, and blow me down, I had no idea that there are so many different animals. So there's all sorts of things we don't know. How many animals have not been discovered? Don't know. Probably 0.1% of the ones we have found.
Yeah, wow. It's not many. All right.
No.
From B in Fourth Preston, why do we have freckles?
Because the universe is a dangerous place. And because 3% of sunlight causes cancer. So by the time it gets to the ground, sunlight is about 50% heat, about 47% light, the colours of the rainbow, and 3% ultraviolet. Causes cancer. Keep away from it. Dangerous stuff. Wear sunblock. Wear full wraparound sunglasses as well. And so what the ultraviolet does is damage the repair mechanisms in your DNA. So in your skin, the cells are dividing all the time. They're dividing, making new copies of the 3 billion rungs in the DNA, and then suddenly they make a mistake. But luckily, there's a repair mechanism. Ultraviolet damages the repair mechanism, so the mistakes don't get fixed, and then you end up with problems like freckles. In most cases, freckles are no big deal. If you're getting freckles right now, you're not wearing enough sunblock. On average in Australia, humans get 80% of their total lifetime sun exposure by the time they're 18. So go out there and start putting on the sunblock.
Wow. Evangeline asks, why are sharks afraid of dolphins?
Dolphins are mean. That smile on their face is just a happy accident of anatomy. If you look at the studies of humans and dolphins interacting, overwhelmingly, dolphins attack humans and break their ribs and do bad things to them. They're mean, and they're mean to other dolphins as well. But they've got a very good marketing campaign. And so, have you heard of the thing called the killer whale?
Absolutely.
The orca? It's not a whale. It's actually a dolphin. But the dolphins are so good at marketing that they turfed it off onto the whales from the dolphin land. And so people think that this really big killer is actually a whale. No, it's a dolphin. Dolphins are mean.
Is that the world's largest dolphin?
I think it would be. It's about 10 tonne and about 10 metres long maximum.
Wow.
I reckon it would be one of the biggest.
Dolphin.
Oh, yeah. And they're mean. I've run into them a few times in the Antarctic. They're also really smart. You want to keep away from them.
There you go. All right. Robin asks, when do you think we will be able to inhabit other planets like Mars?
Oh, that's very easy to answer. You just have to follow the motto of the United States Air Force, the unofficial motto, which is that with enough energy, a pig will fly. You want to get to Mars? Throw some money at it. How much money are we putting at it? Less than we spend on sports clothing. So will we be able to inhabit other planets? Yes, there's a two-part process. First, we have to make it a priority. We have to become a space-going race. And part of that is and the reason for that is that there's always rocks out there which mostly misses, but one day one will hit us, and we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to have enough space-going technology that we can just nudge it out of the way. In 2015, on Halloween, a big rock 6 kilometres in diameter, 600 metres in diameter missed us. Now, that's not as big as the rock that wiped out the dinosaurs. It's about 1/10 as big, but it would have done a lot of damage. If we'd had 3 years warning, we might have been able to do something about it. We only had 3 weeks. So firstly, we have to become a space-going race and invest a lot more in space. while having justice here on Earth and fixing up global warming, which is going to be cheaper than not fixing it up. Secondly, we need better rocket engines. At the moment, we have chemical rockets. Mix two chemicals together, A plus B gives you gas. The gas goes that way, the rocket goes in the other direction. Maximum speed may be 15, 30 kilometres an hour per second, 15 or 30 kilometres a second. Hopeless. What we need is nuclear fusion rockets where we can start travelling at 3,000 kilometres a second. 1/10 of the speed of light, 1% of the speed of light. Then we'll start to become a space-going race and be able to inhabit other planets and get to Mars in about 3 hours instead of 9 months. And then, is that right? 220, 200, 2,000. Okay, so 30 hours. And then thirdly, this meat bag that evolution has given us is a real mess. Like the hip joint I like. Nice ball and socket joint. I've got no problems with the hip joint. But the knee joint, man, it's hopeless. It's like two soup bowls on top of each other, sliding over each other, one pair here and another pair there, held together with gaffer tape on the outside, and then at the front, at the back, and even a bit going down through the middle. Have you heard the anterior cruciate ligament? It's a mess. You look at the anatomy of the knee, it just is really bad. And so according to Freeman Dyson, read his book, Freeman Dyson, Disturb the Universe. According to him, the proper shape for a planet, for human, is a cloud of iron vapor weighing 50 kilograms, the diameter of a planet floating through space on magnetic fields. You can still talk with other humans, and what makes you human is not whether you have arms and legs, but rather that you are one of us, that you can talk with us. That's what makes you human. Being a cloud of iron vapor, don't even worry about it.
Anthony asks, how are you able to retain so much information and facts in that magnificent brain of yours?
It's a three-part process. The first part is, I just adjusted the camera to be a bit more even now. The first part is I was lucky enough to grow up when the Australian government saw education as a worthwhile and good investment in the future. They don't anymore. So I was able to get 28 years of education for free, including 16 years at university for free. So the first part is getting a good education. Because if you educate yourself, well, on one hand, you really know what you know really well, but you don't know the gaps. And you need somebody else who's an expert in that field to tell you what you don't know. So firstly, get a good education. Secondly, I read my way through $10,000 worth of scientific journals every year, which is a pile about a metre thick every month. And then thirdly, I turned into stories. I do about 4 stories every week. And so at the moment, I'll just show you here, my 3 stories this week are, no, that's not it over there. Secret sneeze. Firstly, where did I put it? Grew legs. It'll come back. Was one about chlorophyll water, one about how the ancient Persians in the 11th century invented stainless steel before we thought we did in the 20th century. And so I write these 3 or 4 stories every week. And that way I've got this knowledge, because if you turned into a story, you suddenly remember it. Because if I give you a bunch of words, Dr. Lawrence, say 1,000 words, and they say, hey, remember these words, give them back to me. You know, starting at A for aardvark and finishing up with Z for Zulu. You can't give them back to me. You can't do it. But if they're in a story, you can. So here's a story. So we got woken up the other morning at about 3 weeks ago. There's a loud banging at the front door. I looked out the window. There's this huge stretch limo, and somebody waved to us. So I went downstairs, and who should be there but Kim Kardashian? And he said, hi, Karl. Look, thank you very much. I'd like to take you and your wife on a little trip. Come with us to America. It's a surprise visit. And bring your passports with you. I said, sure. So we go downstairs and we get into the limo. We go to the airport and we get into a private jet. I've never been in a private jet before. And then we fly all the way to Washington, D.C., where we have a whole series of mud baths with all the world leaders, including Joe Biden and Jacinda Ardern and Scotty from marketing. And then we discover that all the world leaders are actually shape-changing aliens from the planet Zog. Now, you can tell me that story back. But if I asked you to tell me those words, you could not. But you can tell me the story. But the story you can. And so the thing about a story is that it's part of the evolution of the human brain as we evolve from being single chimpanzees into groups into developing language as a way of becoming a group and stronger. So you can remember the face of somebody in your family just like that. You don't have to scan it, top, left, across, light, dark, light green, blah, 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 blah. You just remember the whole thing in one go. And with a story, you remember it in one go. So that's how I remember stuff. I do it. I have a good education. I then educate myself by reading journals, and I turn everything into a story.
Awesome. We've got a few questions left, so I got an interesting one.
Yep.
How does prosopagnosia impact your day-to-day life? I'm not sure what that word is.
Prosopagnosia is the inability to recognise faces. Oh. And how does it work? To me, all people's faces basically look like bricks in a wall. There's no difference. I can't pick them. How does it influence me? Well, I can't recognise people, so I just smile benignly at everybody. And if I'm travelling with somebody, if I'm walking with somebody, I say, please. As you come up to somebody, if you recognise them, say, g'day, Fred or Lawrence. And if you don't, say, hi, I'm Jeanette, what's your name? And then I'll be able to recognise them. That's your job, I tell my travelling companion.
All right. Last few questions. Hugo's asking, how do you get rid of acne?
It's difficult. See a GP and follow their advice. I wouldn't worry about it. I know this is a dumb thing to say, but 10 years from now, you'll think, why did I worry about it? The most important thing is not how you look, but how you behave with confidence. And so, way back when I was a hippie, I discovered that I could get into any police building in New South Wales just by dressing up in overalls and walking through confidently.
Crazy.
So be confident. Appreciate that underneath what you are and who you are, and also spend some time doing nothing so your inner creativity comes to the surface. And the acne, it can be very distressing. Trust me, it'll go away. See a GP. But what's more important is who you are. And I had acne. It is really hard, actually.
For sure. Tommy from First North Baldwin's asking, why is music enjoyable?
We don't know, but it is. There are some cultures in the world where music is exactly the same word for dance. You can't have music without dancing. You can't dance without music. You always do the two together. And we think that music is, for some reason, embedded in the human psyche because of our past history where it was the stepping stone from no language to language. We have no proof of that. Just like we have no proof that there's a special story center in the brain where you can just remember the whole story as just one little block. We've got no proof of that either. I should have mentioned that, sorry.
All right, I think this is the last question. How did the first thing in existence exist with nothing to make it?
We have no idea. We are very confident that the Big Bang happened, and we're very confident that we know what happened at certain specified periods afterwards. So at 1/10 of a billionth of a second, we had the Higgs field pop into existence. That's the thing that gives mass to everything. At around 380,000 years of age, we had the first atoms actually forming. With the central core, lots of empty space, the electrons. At around 200, 300 million years of age, we had the first stars forming. We know a lot of stuff about what happened after the Big Bang. What happened before the Big Bang? No idea. No idea at all. And for a while, we were very thrilled when Roger Penrose, a very clever person, scientist, discovered what he thought in the cosmic background radiation. He discovered imprints of a previous universe. And we went looking and it turned out not to be the case. Bummer. It was so close.
All right. Sorry. Very, very last question from Maya, who's from First the Basin. Why is the sea salty?
Because of hot oceanic vents at the top of the longest mountain range on Earth, which you will never see, almost certainly. So this mountain range is 80,000 kilometres long. And it winds around the Earth like a seam on a tennis ball, and it's 2.5 kilometres high, but it's on the ocean floor. You see, we made a mistake when we called our planet Planet Earth. We should have called it Planet Water because 70% of the surface of our planet is covered with water. We made a mistake, right? So with the ocean mountain, this mountain chain running along the ocean floor, the average depth of the oceans is 5 kilometres. The average height of this mountain is 2.5 kilometres. So the top of the mountain is 2.5 kilometres below the ocean floor. And coming up from the bottom, coming up, are these bits of molten lava that come up to the top of the mountain and push out. And as they push out, they immediately freeze. And we've found at about 500 spots along this 80,000 kilometre long mountain chain, we've found places where hot water comes out, loaded at a temperature of up to 460 degrees centigrade, and loaded with all sorts of stuff, including salt. And we think that's how the oceans got salty. Now, the saltiness of the ocean goes up and down. So at one stage in the past, all of the continents on Earth were just joined in one big lump that went from the North Pole to the South Pole. And there was this huge basin, this huge shallow sea with a narrow mouth, and the water would come in at high tide, and then at low tide, the water would evaporate. And so we built up these huge layers of salt, solid salt. And so the salt gradually got taken out of the ocean.
Crazy. All right, Dr. Karl, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, sorry about my first camera and second camera dropping dead, but luckily, because I was a Boy Scout, here's my little badge. See, I'm wearing my Scouts Victoria badge. Yeah, there it is. I got the friendship knot over here, right? So because I was a Boy Scout, I was prepared, and I had not one, but 2 backups.
Yes, Boy Scouts are very prepared. Alex.
And Girl Scouts.
And for sharing so much with us. I'm sure every Scout in Victoria has learned at least one new thing tonight.
Oh,
for sure. I think everyone's learned a whole bunch tonight. All right. I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much, Dr. Karl. We now have a quick video to play for you to finish our night from our STEM State Council, who have a STEM school holiday program coming up. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
See you, Dr. Karl.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Ava and I am a member of the STEM Youth Council. I just wanted to let you know about some great STEM events that we have coming up over the next few months. In the school holidays, we have special days for Joeys and Cubs where we will be doing lots of cool experiments about the science of colour and the science of food. We also have a robotics and electronics day planned during the holidays for Scouts and Venturers.
Hi, I'm Ben, a Victorian rover and a member of the STEM Youth Council. In August, Scouts from all around Australia will be celebrating National Science Week together. We have a special Science of Outdoors program planned, along with some bonus Science of Food activities, tying with the National Science Week theme for 2021, Food, Different by Design. Talk to your unit council about getting involved, and make sure you schedule a science night into your program for late August. The best part is that we are going to give you videos and program plans made by Scouts to help you with your planning. And we have special training days that you can come to so you can lead or assist an awesome Science Week program for your youth. jump onto the Scouts Victoria STEM page and make sure you register for these events soon so you don't miss out.
Did you know that the STEM Youth Council are helping to plan some awesome activities for VicJam at the end of the year? We will have robots, drones, virtual reality, escape rooms, and so much more. There'll even be a chance for some Scouts to talk directly to astronauts in the International Space Station. If you are a Scout and you haven't registered for VicJam, do it tonight! Ben and I hopefully will see you all at some of these STEM events soon.